In every conversation, tension can arise, opinions clash, perspectives differ, and emotions can quickly escalate. Most people believe that winning an argument requires raising their voice, asserting dominance, or overwhelming the other person with words. The reality is different. Calm, deliberate communication often achieves far more than forceful speech ever could. Learning to influence without raising your voice is not about overpowering others. It is about achieving clarity, fostering understanding, and increasing the likelihood of agreement. Arguments rarely succeed when emotions dominate. Shouting, interrupting, or responding impulsively tends to trigger defensiveness in others, reducing the chance of productive resolution. In contrast, a controlled, calm approach enhances credibility and allows your ideas to be heard without unnecessary resistance. Your tone, choice of words, and timing create a subtle but powerful effect on the conversation, increasing the likelihood that your points are considered thoughtfully rather than dismissed emotionally. Understanding the mechanics of calm persuasion begins with awareness. Awareness of your own emotional state, triggers, and impulses allows you to pause before responding. Awareness of the other person's perspective, reasoning, and likely concerns creates an opportunity to address objections constructively. By combining these forms of awareness, you create a dialogue grounded in clarity rather than reaction, which increases the chances of reaching consensus or mutual understanding. Another key principle is strategic listening. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. By genuinely listening, absorbing the ideas being expressed, noting underlying concerns, and identifying areas of agreement, you reduce the likelihood of miscommunication and increase your credibility. Listening conveys respect, encourages openness, and creates space for your points to be considered without confrontation. It turns an argument from a clash into a cooperative exchange of ideas. The words you choose are equally important. Statements framed as suggestions or observations rather than accusations or absolutes tend to be received more openly. Phrases like, "I noticed that," or "one approach could be," signal thoughtfulness instead of confrontation. When this linguistic framing can increase the likelihood that your ideas are evaluated on merit rather than dismissed due to perceived aggression. Timing and pacing also matter. Rapid, overlapping, or emotionally charged speech often triggers defensiveness, while measured, calm articulation allows ideas to resonate. Pausing strategically before responding, emphasizing key points slowly, and modulating tone all enhance clarity and maintain authority without force. As calm articulation communicates confidence, reinforces credibility, and encourages others to engage rationally rather than emotionally. Finally, ethical influence is the cornerstone of winning arguments without raising your voice. The goal is not to manipulate or dominate, but to foster understanding and clarity. Encouraging balanced consideration, acknowledging valid points, and presenting ideas logically increases the likelihood of constructive outcomes. Over time, consistent practice of calm, respectful communication strengthens relationships, builds trust, and makes your voice naturally persuasive, even in difficult discussions. By mastering calm persuasion, listening with intent, choosing words carefully, managing tone and pacing, and emphasizing ethical clarity, you gain the ability to navigate arguments strategically and effectively. You do not need volume to be heard. Clarity, composure, and deliberate communication often carry far more influence than the loudest voice in the room. The skill of winning arguments without raising your voice is not only practical, it is transformative, reshaping how you interact, collaborate, and influence in all areas of life. Chapter 1: Understanding the dynamics of conversation. Before you can influence others calmly, it is essential to understand how conversations function. Every discussion involves a complex interplay of perception, emotion, and intention. Even when an argument appears purely logical, subtle cues, tone, timing, body language, and choice of words shape how ideas are received. Recognizing these dynamics allows you to navigate discussion strategically, increasing the likelihood of clarity and agreement without relying on volume or force. At the foundation of any conversation is mutual attention. When both parties focus on understanding rather than reacting, the probability of productive dialogue rises. People are naturally more receptive when they feel heard and respected. This does not mean agreement is guaranteed, but it does create a fertile environment for ideas to be considered objectively. A calm, attentive approach signals thoughtfulness and encourages the other person to mirror your composure. Emotions and reasoning interact constantly during arguments. Emotional escalation can override logical thought, while calm engagement enhances the clarity of communication. Recognizing when emotions are influencing your own thinking or the other person's enables timely intervention. Pausing before responding, adjusting tone and framing points with observation rather than accusation reduces tension and increases the likelihood that your ideas will be heard without triggering defensiveness. Listening strategically is a cornerstone of calm influence. Most arguments fail not because the argument itself is weak, but because participants listen to respond instead of to understand. Strategic listening involves absorbing not just the words but the underlying meaning, concerns, and priorities. By listening attentively, you demonstrate respect and create an environment in which your points are considered more thoughtfully. Listening also allows you to identify areas of partial agreement, which can be emphasized to build common ground. Clarity in expression enhances persuasion without force, and words framed as observations, reflections, or collaborative suggestions tend to be more effective than statements that sound judgmental or absolute. For example, replacing "you are wrong" with "I notice that there might be another perspective to consider" signals open-mindedness while subtly guiding attention to an alternative view. This approach increases the likelihood that your argument is evaluated rationally rather than dismissed due to perceived confrontation. And the structure of your statements also matters. Presenting points in a logical sequence, supported by examples or evidence, allows the other party to follow your reasoning effortlessly. Rapid-fire ideas or disorganized speech can overwhelm attention and trigger defensive reactions. Calm articulation with a clear flow reinforces credibility, keeps focus on the content, and enhances the probability that your message resonates. Non-verbal cues play a significant role in influence. On maintaining a steady posture, relaxed gestures, and controlled facial expressions reinforces calm authority. In contrast, tension, agitation, or aggressive gestures can undermine your message and escalate conflict. By consciously managing nonverbal communication, you project composure and increase the likelihood that your voice will be received with attention rather than resistance. Timing and pacing are equally important. Interrupting, speaking over someone, or responding too quickly can make the conversation feel combative. Strategic pauses, careful pacing, and deliberate emphasis on key points enhance comprehension and allow ideas to settle. Calm pacing communicates confidence, strengthens perception of authority, and reduces the chances of reactive conflict, creating an environment where ideas are evaluated thoughtfully. Another essential factor is acknowledging valid points made by others. Recognition of legitimate observations does not weaken your position. Instead, it fosters fairness and mutual respect. By acknowledging areas of agreement, you build rapport and increase the likelihood that divergent points are considered seriously. Calm, ethical recognition encourages reciprocal respect and supports clarity over conflict. Finally, adopting a long-term perspective transforms arguments from battles into opportunities for growth. The objective is not to win in the short term by overpowering others, but to foster understanding, preserve relationships, and achieve clarity. Consistently practicing calm, attentive, and structured communication develops a reputation for reliability and thoughtfulness, increasing the likelihood that your influence is welcomed rather than resisted in future discussions. By understanding the dynamics of conversation, balancing attention, emotion, listening, clarity, nonverbal cues, timing, and acknowledgement, you create a foundation for influencing effectively without raising your voice. Calm persuasion is not passive, it is deliberate, strategic, and ethical. Over time, these practices build both credibility and confidence, allowing you to navigate discussions with clarity, composure, and the ability to guide outcomes constructively without force or aggression. Chapter 2: Managing your emotional responses. Winning an argument without raising your voice begins with mastering your own emotional responses. Emotions are the lens through which we interpret words, tone, and intent, and they influence how we react to opposing ideas. In high-tension discussions, even minor irritations or frustrations can escalate, diminishing clarity and reducing the likelihood of productive outcomes. By cultivating emotional awareness and regulation, would you increase the chances of guiding conversations constructively? The first step is self-observation. Being mindful of your own emotional state allows you to notice early signs of tension, irritation, or defensiveness. Small physiological cues, such as a quickened heartbeat, muscle tightness, or internal impatience, signal the onset of emotional escalation. By recognizing these early, you create the opportunity to pause, breathe, and respond deliberately rather than react impulsively, maintaining calm authority in the discussion. Pausing before responding is a simple yet powerful tool. Even a brief pause of a few seconds can shift the tone of a conversation from reactive to thoughtful. During this pause, you can assess the other person's statement, consider your response carefully, and frame your words in a way that encourages understanding rather than conflict. Pausing increases the likelihood that your communication is perceived as reasoned and measured, enhancing influence without volume. Reframing negative impulses is another essential practice. When challenged or confronted with opposing ideas, the natural response may be defensiveness or irritation. Instead, consciously reframe these impulses as opportunities to clarify your perspective, explore shared understanding, or uncover underlying concerns. This approach turns potential emotional triggers into tools for constructive dialogue, increasing the probability of productive outcomes while maintaining composure. Breathing and physical regulation support emotional control. Techniques such as slow, controlled breathing or subtle posture adjustments help maintain internal calm even when external stimuli are provocative. Physiological regulation directly impacts mental clarity, reducing impulsivity and creating space for strategic, deliberate responses. Focus on the message, not the delivery, enhances emotional stability. Often, people react to tone, phrasing, or perceived criticism rather than the content itself. By consciously redirecting attention to the core ideas being expressed, you reduce emotional reactivity and increase the likelihood that your responses are relevant and constructive. Separating intent from delivery allows for calmer, more effective engagement. Empathetic awareness does not require agreement, but supports composure. Recognizing the concerns, priorities, or perspectives motivating the other person fosters patience and reduces defensive reactions. Empathy in this context is analytical rather than emotional indulgence. It informs your responses, allowing you to address points thoughtfully while maintaining calm authority. Managing internal narratives is critical. Arguments often trigger self-talk that amplifies emotional reactions. Thoughts like, "they are attacking me," or "I must win this," can intensify tension. and replacing these narratives with neutral or constructive framing such as "I am exploring this perspective" or "I want to clarify my point," reduces emotional volatility and increases the likelihood that the discussion remains focused on ideas rather than personal conflict. Setting mental boundaries also protects emotional stability. Internally, decide which comments require response and which can be noted without engagement. Not every challenge demands immediate attention, so choosing when to respond preserves energy and prevents escalation. Boundaries create space for measured communication and maintain clarity even in contentious discussions. Practicing perspective-taking enhances emotional control. Viewing the conversation from multiple angles, your own, the other person's, and a neutral observer's, reduces the intensity of reactive emotions and allows for strategic clarity. This practice increases the likelihood that your responses are balanced, rational, and well considered rather than driven by immediate emotional impulses. Finally, emotional regulation is strengthened by consistent practice and reflection. After discussions, review moments where emotions influenced responses and identify strategies for improvement. Over time, this reflective practice increases awareness, strengthens control, and enhances the probability that future conversations remain calm, strategic, and productive. By observing internal states, pausing before responding, i.e. reframing impulses, regulating physiology, focusing on content, applying empathetic awareness, managing narratives, setting boundaries, and practicing perspective. You build the foundation for calm, effective argumentation. Emotional control transforms potential conflict into constructive dialogue, increasing the likelihood that your ideas are understood, respected, and considered thoughtfully, all without raising your voice. Chapter 3. The Power of Strategic Listening. Winning arguments without raising your voice relies heavily on strategic listening, the deliberate act of understanding the other person's perspective while maintaining clarity in your own mind. Listening effectively does not mean passive acceptance or silent submission. Instead, it is an active process that increases the likelihood of mutual understanding, reduces miscommunication, and allows your points to be presented with precision and calm authority. At the core of strategic listening is full attention. When engaging in conversation, focusing entirely on the speaker demonstrates respect and creates a space for thoughtful exchange. Multitasking or planning your response while the other person is speaking diminishes comprehension and increases the chance of misunderstandings. By listening attentively, you ensure that your responses are relevant, measured, and grounded in awareness rather than assumption. Identifying underlying concerns is a critical aspect of listening. People rarely communicate solely through words. Tone, emphasis, and context provide insight into priorities, motivations, or uncertainties. By noting these subtle cues, you can respond in a way that addresses the core of the argument rather than merely reacting to surface-level statements. This approach increases the likelihood that your contributions are received constructively, and even if disagreement remains. Paraphrasing and summarizing are practical tools in strategic listening. Restating the speaker's points in your own words demonstrates understanding and ensures accurate interpretation. For example, phrases such as "what I hear you saying is," or "so your concern is," convey attention and promote clarity. This practice not only minimizes misunderstandings but also encourages the other party to remain calm and engaged, setting the tone for a measured discussion. Team managing interruptions is essential. Interrupting can create tension, reduce receptivity, and escalate conflict. By allowing the other person to complete their points before responding, you convey respect and patience. Strategic pauses before replying give both parties time to process information, reinforcing calm authority and increasing the likelihood of thoughtful exchange. Active questioning enhances comprehension and promotes constructive dialogue. Asking clarifying questions such as, "Can you elaborate on that?" or "How do you see that applying in this context?" encourages elaboration without confrontation. Strategic questions demonstrate engagement, highlight areas for alignment, and provide opportunities to frame your perspective clearly and respectfully. Balancing listening with response is a nuanced skill. While it is important to understand the other perspective fully, it is equally important to communicate your ideas effectively. Strategic listening allows you to gather sufficient information before articulating points in a structured and composed manner. This balance increases the chance that your contributions are considered seriously rather than dismissed due to impatience or perceived hostility. Observing emotional dynamics during conversation supports effective listening. Recognizing moments of tension, frustration, or hesitation provides insight into how statements are being received. But responding calmly to emotional cues, adjusting tone, and maintaining composure reduce the likelihood of escalation and enhance the perception of credibility and fairness. Recognizing patterns in argumentation can improve listening effectiveness. People often use recurring themes, logic structures, or common objections. By identifying these patterns, you can anticipate concerns and address them proactively without aggression. Pattern recognition enhances clarity and demonstrates thoughtful engagement, making your responses more persuasive and reducing the need for raised voices. Self-regulation. During listening is as important as understanding the speaker. Preventing reactive thoughts, internal counter-arguments, or emotional responses from overtaking attention ensures that comprehension remains the focus. Techniques such as deep breathing, mental note-taking, or silent summarization can support sustained concentration, enabling calm and precise articulation of your viewpoint. Finally, strategic listening fosters ethical influence and mutual clarity. By listening carefully, acknowledging valid points, and responding thoughtfully, you create an environment where ideas are evaluated on merit rather than on emotional intensity. This approach reinforces respect, builds credibility, and increases the likelihood of productive outcomes, all without relying on volume or force. By giving full attention, identifying underlying concerns, paraphrasing, managing interruptions, asking clarifying questions, balancing response, observing emotions, recognizing patterns, and practicing self-regulation, you harness the power of strategic listening. Calm, deliberate listening transforms arguments from confrontations into dialogues and increases the probability that your ideas are understood, respected, and thoughtfully considered, allowing influence through clarity rather than volume. Chapter 4. Framing your ideas with clarity. Calm persuasion. In arguments depends not only on listening but also on how you frame your ideas. Clear, precise, and structured communication increases the likelihood that your perspective is understood, considered fairly, and respected. Framing is not about forcing agreement. It is about presenting information in a way that facilitates comprehension and reduces unnecessary resistance. The first principle of framing is simplicity without oversimplification. Complex ideas can be broken into manageable components while retaining accuracy. Using concise language and focusing on one point at a time prevents confusion, overload, or frustration. Simplifying ideas improves clarity and allows the listener to follow reasoning without feeling overwhelmed, increasing the probability of effective dialogue. Logical sequencing is equally important. Presenting ideas in a coherent, step-by-step manner allows the listener to grasp the rationale behind your points. Start with context or background, move to key observations, and then provide implications or recommendations. A structured presentation minimizes ambiguity and enhances the perception of thoughtfulness and credibility. Using neutral, descriptive language supports calm argumentation. Avoid words that imply judgment, blame, or superiority. Statements such as "it appears that," or one way to consider this is convey observation and reasoning rather than confrontation. Neutral framing reduces defensiveness in the listener and increases the likelihood that ideas are considered objectively. Evidence-based statements strengthen your position without requiring volume. Facts, examples, and well-reasoned observations provide tangible support for your points. While evidence does not guarantee agreement, it increases the probability that your ideas are respected and considered thoughtfully. Presenting evidence calmly communicates preparation, discipline, and credibility. Highlighting common ground before introducing divergence is a subtle but effective technique. Acknowledging areas of agreement signals fairness and reduces resistance. Once shared understanding is established, introducing differing perspectives is more likely to be received with openness rather than defensiveness. Framing differences constructively increases the likelihood of productive discussion. Asking reflective questions can guide attention without confrontation. Questions like, "How might this approach address your concern?" or "What would be the outcome if we considered this perspective?" Invite analysis and encourage collaboration. This approach reduces the need for argument escalation and fosters dialogue focused on reasoning rather than emotion. Tone and pacing are critical components of framing. Speaking too quickly or with excessive emphasis can inadvertently signal aggression or impatience. Conversely, measured pacing, calm tone, and deliberate pauses allow your ideas to resonate. Modulating voice for clarity rather than force increases the probability that your message is processed thoughtfully, promoting understanding without volume. Framing through analogy and context enhances comprehension. Relating abstract or complex points to familiar concepts helps the listener connect ideas to their own understanding. Analogies should be accurate and neutral, illustrating without exaggeration. Effective analogies increase clarity and reduce the likelihood of misinterpretation, fostering smooth, calm communication. Anticipating questions or objections allows you to frame ideas proactively, consider potential concerns and address them within your initial explanation. This demonstrates preparation and thoughtfulness, increasing the probability that your ideas are taken seriously while reducing the likelihood of defensive reactions. Ethical anticipation focuses on clarity and understanding rather than manipulation. Finally, consistent practice and reflection strengthen framing skills. After discussions, review how ideas were received, noting areas for improvement in clarity, sequencing, or neutrality. Refining your approach over time enhances both confidence and effectiveness in calm argumentation. By simplifying ideas, sequencing logically, using neutral language, supporting points with evidence, highlighting common ground, asking reflective questions, modulating tone and pacing, applying analogies, anticipating objections, and practicing reflection, you frame your arguments with clarity. Calm, deliberate framing increases the likelihood that your ideas are understood. It reduces unnecessary tension and transforms discussions into opportunities for constructive engagement rather than conflict. Chapter 5. Controlling Tone and Non-Verbal Communication. Winning arguments without raising your voice depends as much on tone and non-verbal communication as it does on the words you use. Humans interpret more than 70% of communication through cues such as voice modulation, posture, facial expressions, and gestures. Even a well-reasoned argument can be undermined if tone or body language signals tension, impatience, or aggression. Learning to control these elements increases the likelihood that your ideas are received thoughtfully, promoting clarity and calm engagement. The first principle is maintaining a steady and calm voice. Vocal fluctuations, such as abrupt increases in volume or rapid speech, often trigger defensive reactions. By controlling pitch, pace, and volume, do you convey confidence without dominance? A steady voice signals composure, encourages attention, and increases the probability that your points are considered objectively. Pacing and pauses enhance comprehension. Allowing brief pauses between statements provides time for your listener to process information and for you to gather thoughts. Pausing before responding to questions or objections demonstrates deliberation and restraint, reducing the likelihood of reactive exchanges. Thoughtful pacing creates rhythm in the conversation, making your contributions more persuasive through calm articulation. Body posture reinforces authority and engagement. Standing or sitting upright with relaxed shoulders conveys confidence without aggression. Leaning slightly forward demonstrates interest, while maintaining an open stance signals receptiveness. Closed or rigid postures, on the other hand, can be perceived as defensive or confrontational. Our strategic posture management increases the chance that your presence supports rather than undermines your communication. Gestures should be controlled and deliberate. Hand movements that are too rapid, frequent, or sharp may unintentionally signal frustration or impatience. Using measured gestures to emphasize points enhances clarity and engagement. Gestures aligned with verbal communication reinforce ideas and improve the likelihood that your listener follows the logic of your argument. But facial expressions play a subtle but significant role. Smiling, nodding, or maintaining neutral expressions demonstrates engagement and approachability, whereas frowning, scowling, or rolling eyes can provoke defensiveness. Calm, composed facial expressions encourage dialogue and signal fairness, increasing the probability that your arguments are received with attention rather than resistance. Eye contact is a crucial aspect of non-verbal communication. A balanced eye contact communicates confidence and attentiveness, fostering trust and receptivity. Excessive staring or avoidance, however, can create discomfort or suspicion. Maintaining natural, consistent eye contact supports calm engagement and increases the likelihood that your points are understood. Monitoring micro-signals can inform adaptive adjustments. Observing subtle reactions, slight shifts in posture, facial tension, and changes in tone helps you gauge receptivity and adjust accordingly. This is not about manipulation, it is about ethical awareness. Adjusting delivery to maintain clarity and calm reduces misunderstandings and encourages thoughtful consideration. Synchronizing verbal and non-verbal cues strengthens credibility. Contradictions between words and tone or gestures often create confusion or mistrust. For instance, stating, "I understand your concern," while frowning or clenching fists diminishes the effectiveness of your statement. Aligning speech, tone, and gestures enhances clarity and reinforces the perception of composure and fairness. Emotional regulation supports non-verbal consistency. Controlling internal reactions directly influences body language and tone. When frustration or impatience arises, techniques such as deep breathing, subtle posture adjustments, or mental reframing help maintain calm expression. Consistent regulation ensures that non-verbal communication supports, rather than detracts from, your arguments. Finally, practice and reflection solidify mastery of tone and non-verbal communication. Reviewing past discussions, noting how posture, gestures, and tone influenced outcomes, and experimenting with adjustments strengthens awareness and skill. Over time, deliberate control of non-verbal communication becomes intuitive, increasing the probability that your arguments are persuasive through calm authority rather than volume. By maintaining a steady voice, controlling pacing, managing posture and gestures, aligning facial expressions, practicing balanced eye contact, observing micro-signals, synchronizing verbal and non-verbal cues, and reinforcing emotional regulation, you leverage non-verbal communication to win arguments ethically. Calm, deliberate presence enhances clarity, reduces tension, and ensures that your message is received thoughtfully, creating an environment where dialogue thrives without raising your voice. Chapter 6. Building credibility and trust. Winning arguments without raising your voice relies heavily on credibility and trust. Your ideas are more likely to be heard and considered thoughtfully when the other person perceives you as fair, knowledgeable, and consistent. Credibility is not about asserting dominance. It is about demonstrating reliability, thoughtfulness, and ethical engagement. Trust emerges when people recognize that your contributions are measured, informed, and respectful. The first step in building credibility is demonstrating expertise without arrogance. Being well informed about the subject matter allows you to present ideas confidently and accurately. Avoid exaggeration or overstatement. Instead, provide precise observations, examples, or data when appropriate. Communicating knowledge with humility increases the likelihood that your perspective is respected rather than resisted. Consistency in behavior reinforces trust. People notice patterns of thought and interaction over time. Consistently responding calmly, respecting others' viewpoints, and maintaining composure even in challenging discussions signals reliability. When credibility is established through repeated behavior, your calm arguments are more likely to be evaluated seriously, reducing the need to raise your voice to be heard. Transparency in reasoning strengthens influence. Explaining the rationale behind your statements, why you hold a certain perspective, or how you arrived at a conclusion, enhances understanding and reduces misinterpretation. Transparency communicates honesty and increases the probability that your ideas are assessed logically rather than dismissed due to perceived hidden motives. Acknowledging uncertainty can enhance credibility, and no one has complete knowledge or absolute insight into every situation. Phrasing statements with moderated language such as, "It appears likely that," or "one perspective to consider is," demonstrates thoughtfulness and avoids the perception of rigidity or overconfidence. Recognizing the limits of understanding fosters trust and makes your contributions more approachable and persuasive. Demonstrating fairness is essential. Giving credit where due, and acknowledging valid points from the other party, and avoiding disparaging remarks convey integrity. Fair engagement increases the likelihood that your ideas are received without defensiveness and encourages reciprocity in consideration. Ethical influence thrives when both parties perceive mutual respect. Active listening supports credibility. When people feel genuinely heard, they are more receptive to reasoned input. Listening attentively, summarizing key points, and responding thoughtfully signal that your engagement is deliberate rather than reactive. This approach reinforces the perception of reliability and increases the probability that your arguments will be taken seriously. Managing expectations also contributes to trust. Avoid promising outcomes or suggesting certainty where none exists. Instead, focus on providing insights, perspectives, and probabilities. And this realistic approach ensures that your credibility is not compromised and that discussions remain grounded in practical reasoning rather than overconfidence. Building a rapport over time enhances influence. Relationships where trust and respect have been nurtured allow for calmer, more productive dialogues even in disagreement. Consistent ethical engagement, transparency, and fairness create a foundation where your voice carries weight without the need for volume or coercion. Influence becomes a natural byproduct of sustained credibility. Responding thoughtfully to challenges is another key component. When confronted with opposing viewpoints, maintain composure, acknowledge the perspective, and provide reasoned feedback. Reactive or emotionally charged responses undermine credibility, while measured, deliberate responses strengthen it. Thoughtful engagement signals authority without aggression and increases the likelihood that your points are considered carefully. Finally, reflection and continuous improvement reinforce credibility and trust. After discussions, evaluate how your communication affected perceptions, whether clarity was maintained, and how relationships were influenced. Identifying areas for refinement and adjusting approaches strengthens both self-awareness and reliability in future arguments. By demonstrating knowledge with humility, maintaining consistency, explaining reasoning, acknowledging uncertainty, showing fairness, or listening actively, managing expectations, building rapport, responding thoughtfully, and practicing reflection, you establish credibility and trust. Calm, ethical influence is amplified when your audience perceives reliability, integrity, and competence, creating an environment where arguments are evaluated on merit rather than emotion or volume. Norm Chapter 7. Handling objections. Calmly. One of the most critical skills in winning arguments without raising your voice is handling objections calmly and strategically. Objections are a natural and inevitable part of any discussion. They do not indicate failure, rather they reveal engagement, provide insight into differing perspectives, and highlight areas where clarity may be needed. Responding effectively requires patience, composure, and a deliberate focus on constructive dialogue rather than reactive confrontation. The ability to manage objections calmly increases the probability that conversations remain productive, fostering understanding without escalating tension. The first step in addressing objections is listening attentively. Many arguments escalate because participants fail to truly hear one another. When an objection arises, allow the other person to express it fully without interruption. This approach ensures that you accurately understand the concern and signals respect for their perspective. Strategic listening not only improves comprehension, but also sets a calm tone, demonstrating that you are committed to thoughtful engagement rather than emotional reaction. Acknowledging the objection is equally important. Recognition of another person's point of view does not imply agreement. It communicates fairness, attentiveness, and ethical engagement. Phrases such as, "I understand your concern," or "that is a valid perspective," demonstrate that you have considered the objection seriously. Acknowledgement creates an atmosphere of mutual respect and increases the likelihood that your subsequent response will be received with attention rather than defensiveness. Clarifying the objection ensures you are responding to the root issue rather than a superficial misunderstanding. Ask questions like, "Could you explain what specifically concerns you about this point?" Or, "Which part of this idea feels unclear or challenging?" Clarification reduces the risk of misinterpretation and enables you to craft a response that addresses the underlying concern accurately. The process of clarification also signals analytical engagement, which encourages calm and rational discussion. Responding with structured reasoning is essential. Once the objection is fully understood, present your counterpoints in a logical, step-by-step manner. Support your argument with evidence, examples, or reasoned explanations whenever possible. Structured reasoning communicates competence and credibility, increases the probability that your response is considered thoughtfully, and minimizes the need for raised voices. A well-organized answer also prevents emotional escalation by framing discussion around ideas, not personalities. Managing emotional triggers during objections is critical. Objections may be expressed in ways that feel challenging, dismissive, or even provocative. Reacting impulsively to these perceived provocations can derail a conversation. Maintaining composure ensures your responses remain rational, calm, and effective. Techniques such as controlled breathing, silent mental summaries, or brief pauses allow you to process the objection fully before responding, reducing the likelihood of reactive escalation. Using probability-based language strengthens ethical influence. Avoid framing your responses as absolute truths or guarantees. Instead, emphasize possibilities, potential outcomes, or likelihoods. For instance, rather than saying, "This method will work for sure," you could say, "This approach increases the likelihood of success given these conditions." Moderated language demonstrates thoughtfulness, preserves credibility, and increases the probability that your argument is received constructively. Reframing objections as opportunities transforms potential conflict into productive dialogue. Every objection provides insight into the other person's priorities, reasoning, and concerns. Viewing objections through this lens allows you to refine your communication, identify shared goals, and introduce solutions or clarifications that address the core issue. Reframing creates an environment in which the discussion remains collaborative rather than adversarial. Balancing assertiveness with openness is key when handling objections. Assertiveness ensures that your perspective is communicated clearly, while openness demonstrates respect and willingness to engage. This balance enhances credibility and encourages reciprocal consideration. It also increases the probability that the discussion remains constructive, minimizing the likelihood of tension or defensive reactions. Keeping focus on the issue, not the individual, is another vital principle. Objectively addressing the ideas or points presented prevents personalizing disagreements, which can lead to emotional escalation. Maintaining a focus on reasoning rather than personalities helps ensure the conversation remains calm and productive, allowing arguments to be evaluated on merit rather than perceived attacks. Anticipating objections in advance can further strengthen your communication. By considering potential challenges before presenting your points, you can incorporate clarifications, explanations, and evidence proactively. Anticipation demonstrates preparedness, reduces the probability of surprises that could trigger reactive responses, and increases the chance of maintaining calm and measured dialogue. Reflective practice solidifies the ability to handle objections effectively. After discussions, review which responses were successful in maintaining calm engagement and which moments could be improved. Consider how objections were acknowledged, clarified, and addressed, and identify strategies for refining your approach. Iterative reflection enhances awareness, self-regulation, and strategic clarity over time. Handling objections calmly also fosters long-term influence and trust. Consistently demonstrating composure, fairness, and reasoned engagement builds credibility, which increases the likelihood that future contributions are respected without raising your voice. By cultivating patience, strategic awareness, and ethical responsiveness, you transform potentially tense moments into opportunities for collaboration, mutual understanding, and thoughtful resolution. In summary, effective objection handling relies on attentive listening, acknowledgement, clarification, structured reasoning, emotional management, a moderated language, reframing, assertive openness, focus on ideas, anticipation, and reflective practice. Each principle contributes to creating a conversational environment where ideas are evaluated carefully, conflicts are minimized, and influence is guided by clarity and ethical engagement rather than volume or force. Calmly navigating objections enhances understanding, preserves relationships, and strengthens your ability to communicate persuasively, making this skill essential for any strategic conversational approach. Chapter 8. Using questions to guide conversations. A highly effective tool in winning arguments without raising your voice is the strategic use of questions. Questions do more than gather information. They guide attention, promote reflection, and encourage clarity. When applied thoughtfully, they create an environment where your ideas are considered carefully and calmly, fostering understanding rather than conflict. Mastering the art of questioning enhances both your influence and the quality of dialogue. The first principle is open-ended questioning. Unlike yes or no questions, open-ended questions invite elaboration and exploration. For example, asking, "How do you envision this approach working in practice?" encourages thought and engagement, while a question such as, "Why don't you agree?" may trigger defensiveness. Open-ended inquiries create space for reasoning and reflection, and increasing the probability that the conversation remains calm and productive. Clarifying questions help ensure accurate understanding. People may express ideas in ways that are unclear or incomplete. By asking, "Could you explain what you mean by that?" or "Can you provide an example of your point?" you confirm intent, minimize misinterpretation, and demonstrate attentiveness. Clarification allows your responses to address the core of the discussion, much improving the likelihood of productive engagement. Probing underlying reasoning deepens understanding. Questions like, "What led you to that conclusion?" or "Which factors influenced your perspective?" uncover assumptions, priorities, or constraints that shape opinions. Understanding these underlying elements allows you to respond thoughtfully, addressing substantive points rather than surface disagreements. This approach increases the probability of constructive dialogue and minimizes unnecessary tension. Guiding reflection through questions encourages the other party to analyze their own reasoning, asking, "What might be the outcome if we tried this approach?" or "How would this solution affect the overall situation?" promotes critical evaluation without confrontation. Guiding reflection creates a cooperative tone, increases engagement, and enhances the likelihood that your perspective is considered thoughtfully. Balancing inquiry with contribution is essential. Questions should not replace your points, they complement them. After gathering insights through questioning, you should respond with reasoned and structured arguments. This balance maintains authority while facilitating dialogue, allowing the conversation to remain focused, respectful, and calm. A neutral language in questioning preserves clarity and reduces defensiveness. Avoid framing questions in ways that imply judgment, blame, or superiority. Instead, use neutral phrasing such as, "How do you interpret this situation?" or "What are your thoughts on this approach?" Neutral questions signal fairness, fostering receptivity and increasing the likelihood of cooperative exchange. Timing and pacing of questions influence their effectiveness. Rapid-fire questioning or introducing too many queries at once can overwhelm the listener. Spacing questions thoughtfully, pausing to allow reflection, and listening carefully before continuing promotes calm engagement. Well-timed questions increase the probability that your audience remains attentive and receptive. Combining questions with acknowledgement strengthens rapport. For example, after someone explains their point, you might say, "I see your perspective. How do you think this idea could work alongside that approach?" Acknowledgement followed by inquiry demonstrates respect, encourages collaboration, and supports clarity without escalating tension. Anticipating potential questions enhances strategic communication. By considering which questions the listener might have and addressing them proactively, you can guide the conversation toward understanding while minimizing confusion or defensiveness. This approach increases the likelihood that dialogue proceeds smoothly and that your points are received thoughtfully. Using questions to explore consequences encourages analytical thinking, asking, "What would likely happen if we implemented this idea?" or "How might this affect other aspects of the situation?" stimulates evaluation of outcomes. Focusing on consequences rather than personal judgments fosters reasoned discussion, while making it easier for your listener to engage with your perspective objectively. Iterative refinement through reflection improves questioning skills. After discussions, review which questions elicited thoughtful responses and which failed to guide understanding. Analyzing these patterns enhances awareness and allows for refinement of your questioning strategy. Over time, you develop the ability to guide conversations efficiently and calmly, reducing the need for volume or force. Strategic questioning also encourages collaborative problem-solving. Rather than positioning yourself in opposition, questions can uncover shared goals, highlight common ground, and invite joint exploration of solutions. This approach reinforces calm, constructive engagement and increases the probability of reaching mutually beneficial outcomes. In summary, using questions effectively involves open-ended, clarifying, probing, reflective, neutral, well-timed, and strategically framed inquiries. Balancing inquiry with contribution, anticipating potential responses, and refining techniques through reflection enhances your ability to guide discussions calmly and ethically. Mastering this skill transforms arguments into collaborative exchanges, increasing the likelihood that your ideas are understood and considered without raising your voice. Questions become a subtle but powerful tool for fostering clarity, encouraging analytical thinking, and promoting thoughtful engagement, are enabling influence through insight and respect rather than volume or force. Chapter 9. Maintaining composure. Under pressure. Winning arguments without raising your voice is not solely about strategy, logic, or persuasive phrasing. One of the most critical skills is maintaining composure under pressure. High-stakes discussions, emotional objections, or unexpected challenges can easily provoke frustration, impatience, or defensive reactions. Remaining calm in such situations enhances clarity, increases credibility, and improves the probability that your points are received thoughtfully. Composure is the foundation of influence through calm, measured communication. The first step in maintaining composure is self-awareness. Recognizing your emotional state during a conversation allows you to respond rather than react. Subtle signs of tension, such as increased heart rate, shallow breathing, or racing thoughts, are indicators that composure may be at risk. And by becoming aware of these signals, you can implement strategies to regain calm before continuing the dialogue. Self-awareness is the cornerstone of ethical, disciplined influence and ensures that your behavior supports clarity rather than escalating conflict. Controlled breathing is a practical tool for regulating emotions. Slow, deep breaths help reduce physiological signs of stress and signal internal calm. In high-pressure moments, pausing to inhale and exhale deliberately allows your mind to reset and prevents reactive impulses from dominating your response. This simple practice increases the likelihood that your communication remains measured and deliberate, reinforcing your credibility and composure. Mental reframing is another essential technique. Pressure often arises when unexpected objections, criticism, or challenging viewpoints emerge. Reframing these situations as opportunities for clarification, learning, or collaboration transforms potential stressors into constructive elements of the discussion. Instead of interpreting objections as attacks, viewing them as avenues for engagement reduces tension and promotes ethical influence through reasoned dialogue. Strategic pausing is a subtle but powerful approach to composure. Before responding to emotionally charged statements or complex objections, take a brief pause. This allows time to process the information, organize your thoughts, and craft a reasoned response. Pauses not only prevent reactive escalation but also enhance the perception of confidence, authority, and fairness. People are more likely to consider your perspective carefully when they observe deliberation rather than impulsive reaction. Maintaining consistent tone and body language under pressure reinforces composure. Sudden shifts in volume, facial expressions, or gestures can unintentionally signal aggression, frustration, or impatience. Only by keeping your voice steady, gestures controlled, and posture relaxed but confident, you project calm authority. Consistency in non-verbal communication increases the probability that your arguments are evaluated based on their merit rather than perceived hostility. Preparation for potential pressure points reduces the risk of losing composure. Anticipate objections, difficult questions, or emotionally charged topics in advance. By preparing structured, thoughtful responses, you are less likely to be caught off guard, which enhances calmness and confidence. Being prepared does not guarantee agreement, but it increases the likelihood of measured, effective dialogue, even in challenging situations. Focusing on ideas rather than personalities is critical when tensions rise. Arguments often become heated when participants personalize disagreements. Shifting attention back to the content, facts, reasoning, or perspectives reduces emotional escalation and fosters productive exchange. Maintaining this focus under pressure improves clarity, preserves relationships, and ensures discussions remain grounded in ethical communication. Managing internal dialogue supports external composure. People often experience critical self-talk during disagreements, such as impulses to dominate, defend, or counterattack. By monitoring and moderating these internal impulses, you can prevent emotional escalation. Techniques such as silently summarizing the other person's point or mentally outlining a calm response keep your focus on clarity and reasoning rather than reactionary behavior. Empathetic awareness contributes to composure without compromising assertiveness. Understanding that others may also feel stressed, frustrated, or defensive allows you to respond with patience and measured language. Empathy does not mean concession, and it is a strategic awareness that reduces unnecessary tension and increases the probability of constructive engagement. Reinforcing ethical influence is central to composure. Pressure should never justify manipulative tactics or coercion. Instead, maintain respect, fairness, and focus on clarity. Composure under pressure enhances credibility and demonstrates a disciplined approach that encourages mutual consideration. When others perceive that you are calm and reasoned, they are more likely to reflect the same behavior in response. Practicing reflection after discussions strengthens composure over time. After high-pressure conversations, review moments where composure was challenged, identify triggers, analyze your responses, and develop strategies for improvement. Iterative reflection fosters self-discipline, awareness, and resilience, ensuring that future conversations remain calm and productive. The cumulative effect of composure is profound. Maintaining calm under pressure increases the likelihood that ideas are understood, relationships are preserved, and disagreements are resolved ethically. Composure signals authority without dominance, confidence without arrogance, and strategic clarity without coercion. This approach transforms tense interactions into opportunities for reasoned dialogue and mutual understanding. In practice, maintaining composure involves self-awareness, controlled breathing, mental reframing, strategic pausing, consistent tone and body language, preparation, focus on ideas, managing internal dialogue, empathetic awareness, ethical influence, and reflective practice. Each element contributes to the ability to navigate challenging discussions without raising your voice, ensuring that influence arises from clarity, credibility, and ethical engagement rather than force or volume. By mastering these techniques, you increase the probability that your arguments are evaluated on merit, foster mutual understanding, and create an environment where calm dialogue prevails. Composure is not merely a tool for immediate success. It is a long-term strategy for ethical influence, thoughtful engagement, and consistent, credible communication. Chapter 10. Applying calm argumentation in everyday life. Winning arguments without raising your voice is not a skill reserved for formal debates or high-stakes negotiations. Its true power is revealed when applied consistently in everyday life, from professional meetings and collaborative projects to casual discussions and personal relationships. Practicing calm argumentation in routine interactions strengthens communication, increases understanding, and fosters long-term influence built on clarity and respect. The first step in everyday application is developing awareness of conversational patterns. Observe when conversations tend to escalate, Key which topics provoke strong reactions and how you personally respond under pressure. By recognizing these patterns, you gain insight into opportunities to maintain calm engagement. Awareness allows for proactive preparation, increasing the probability that discussions remain productive rather than devolving into conflict. Active listening is a foundational component of everyday calm argumentation. Listening attentively without interrupting demonstrates respect and encourages thoughtful responses. Summarizing the other person's points, reflecting on their concerns, and asking clarifying questions ensures mutual understanding. Effective listening increases the likelihood that your arguments are considered carefully and promotes an environment where dialogue, rather than confrontation, prevails. Framing ideas with clarity is equally crucial. Presenting thoughts in a structured, concise, and logically sequenced manner allows others to follow your reasoning easily. Using neutral language, avoiding absolutes, and supporting points with evidence enhances comprehension and credibility. Clear framing increases the probability that your perspective is understood and reduces the chance of misinterpretation or defensive reactions. Controlling tone and non-verbal cues reinforces calm argumentation in daily interactions. Maintaining steady vocal pitch, measured pacing, relaxed posture, and neutral facial expressions signals composure and attentiveness. Consistency between words, tone, and gestures prevents miscommunication and fosters trust, making it easier for others to engage with your ideas thoughtfully. Handling objections ethically and strategically is a daily skill. Expect differing opinions and respond with structured reasoning, acknowledgement, and reflective questions. By addressing objections without reacting emotionally, you demonstrate fairness and composure. This approach increases the likelihood of collaborative resolution and ensures that disagreements are navigated constructively rather than confrontationally. Using questions to guide discussions allows for influence without pressure. Thoughtfully framed, open-ended questions encourage reflection, reveal underlying priorities, and foster dialogue. For example, asking, "What are your thoughts on this approach?" or "How might this solution impact other areas?" encourages consideration without confrontation. In everyday life, question-based guidance transforms discussions into opportunities for mutual understanding. Maintaining composure under pressure is often the defining factor between productive dialogue and escalation. Techniques such as controlled breathing, mental reframing, and strategic pausing help regulate responses to stress or unexpected challenges. When composure is preserved, your communication remains credible, measured, and persuasive, even in high-tension scenarios. Composure is not a passive trait, it is an active strategy for ethical influence. Balancing assertiveness with openness ensures that your perspective is communicated clearly while remaining receptive to alternative viewpoints. Assertiveness establishes your contribution as thoughtful and intentional, whereas openness signals fairness and collaboration. In everyday interactions, this balance increases the probability that dialogue remains calm, constructive, and mutually beneficial. Building credibility and trust over time strengthens daily argumentation. Consistent behavior, responding thoughtfully, acknowledging valid points, and maintaining composure signals reliability and integrity. High trust ensures that your future contributions are evaluated based on their merit rather than emotional reaction, allowing calm influence to become a habitual aspect of your interactions. Reflecting on conversations fosters continuous improvement. After discussions, review how you handled objections, phrased questions, and maintained composure. Identify successes and areas for refinement. Iterative reflection enhances self-awareness and strengthens the ability to navigate daily arguments ethically and calmly. Over time, this reflective practice cultivates long-term mastery of communication. Applying calm argumentation ethically ensures that influence arises from clarity and respect rather than manipulation. The goal is not to dominate or coerce, but to communicate effectively, foster understanding, and reach solutions collaboratively. Ethical engagement preserves relationships, and promotes fairness and builds credibility, increasing the likelihood that ideas are received thoughtfully and considered seriously. Integration into personal and professional life maximizes the utility of this skill. In workplaces, calm argumentation enhances collaboration, prevents unnecessary conflict, and increases the probability of constructive decision-making. In personal relationships, it strengthens understanding, reduces tension, and encourages mutual respect. Across all contexts, calm, structured, and ethical communication creates an environment in which dialogue thrives and solutions are achieved collaboratively. Cumulative benefits of calm argumentation become evident over time. Individuals who consistently communicate calmly demonstrate reliability, strategic clarity, and ethical influence. Others are more likely to respond in kind, fostering a culture of thoughtful dialogue. Mastery of these skills increases personal credibility, enhances problem-solving capacity, and improves relationships in both professional and personal spheres. In summary, applying calm argumentation in everyday life involves awareness, active listening, clear framing, controlled tone, and non-verbal communication, ethical objection handling, strategic questioning, composure under pressure, balanced assertiveness, credibility building, reflective practice, ethical engagement, and integration across contexts. Each element contributes to a communication style that persuades through clarity, fosters understanding, and ensures influence without aggression or raised voices. By consistently practicing these principles, you transform ordinary conversations into opportunities for constructive engagement, thoughtful resolution, and mutually respectful outcomes. Calm argumentation is not merely a technique. It is a way of approaching dialogue that prioritizes clarity, respect, and ethical influence. Through disciplined practice and reflection, this approach becomes habitual, empowering you to navigate discussions of any kind with composure and effectiveness. In mastering the art of calm, measured communication, you gain the ability to engage thoughtfully, resolve disagreements constructively, and cultivate influence based on understanding rather than volume. Every interaction, no matter how routine, becomes an opportunity to apply these principles, reinforcing credibility, strengthening relationships, and fostering a culture of thoughtful, deliberate dialogue.